back to the transition table, where we have honest conversations about aging, home, health, and all the transitions that come with life's later chapters. Today's episode is a little different because it is incredibly personal for me. Before we talk about hearing health, hearing aids, brain health, or anything else, I want to tell you about someone very special to me. My papa. So my papa had good hearing for over 5 decades, and conversations had been really challenging because for him to be a part of them, he would have to be honest about the fact that he didn't hear what was just said. You know, you've been there with those conversations. You, Stephanie, for sure. But everyone has that loved one or important person in their life who can't hear what they're saying. And so you have to speak up for them to hear it again. And, it was just really hard to have everyday conversations to figure out what Papa wanted to eat off of the menu. Sometimes it can take 20 minutes to just have that conversation because of all of the noise that's in the background. So I remember my dad and us, our, lunch events, our dinner events for holidays, or just, that weekend that we finally got together, how hard it was for my dad to even order anything for himself off the menu. The waitress would keep coming back and ask, "Are you ready?" And he finally would determine what Papa wants to eat. But then he's like, okay, now I have to look at the menu and figure out what I want to eat. And so over the years, Papa just hasn't been able to participate in conversation. And you notice him becoming quieter, and it's become very apparent how depressed he has become over that lack of being able to contribute to conversation and even just know what's happening. And so one day I met Stephanie at a Better Living for Seniors meeting, and I remember her standing and introducing herself, in which she does in such a way that is so memorable. She just doesn't even know. You just don't even know, Stephanie. And you said that you made house calls, and you were talking about Polk County, and I don't remember, there was some kind of funny, but I stood up and said, "Oh my gosh, do you travel outside of Polk County and cover other, Central Florida areas?" And so I was surprised to hear, yes, Stephanie does travel, and she does make house calls to help older adults hear again. And what ended up happening is us just kind of coming together in Polk County anyway. And quickly, the story about that was my dad just picked Papa up. He lives in Apopka. My dad lives in Eustis, and he picked him up for their normal, I think it was lunch. It was a lunch hour, and it wasn't normal though. It was during the week, I believe. And so that part of it was abnormal, but Papa didn't think anything of it. And he just was looking forward to the time. Well, then Dad said that he was coming out, he was bringing him to Polk County, and we were going to see each other, and we were going to the library, and Papa thought that was kind of weird, but great, I'm going to see Nicole and the kids. Sure, let's go. And then Dad broke the news to him on the ride and said, "We're actually meeting Nicole, yes, but she's introducing us to Stephanie, who's going to give you a hearing test." And this was something that Papa was incredibly against. He had gone to many hearing tests in the past. And when doctors have said, okay, well, you need surgery because you have a hole in your ear, he's like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm just, I haven't heard for 50 years. Who cares? I'm 91. He was 91 at the time. And it is what it is. I'm just, chalking it up to I can't hear. And that's that. And so, surprise, I called Dad, and he said he's actually excited. He grinned ear to ear when he said he was actually going for a hearing test. And so, long story short, Papa walked out hearing a whole 78% better. I don't know how, Stephanie, how you really nailed that percentage down, but he was hearing 78% better rather than he has in five decades. And so I just wanted to share that story, and that that this experience completely changed the way that I think about hearing. It really isn't just about hearing sounds, it's about hearing laughter, being a part of the conversation, and stories and connection. And so that's why I invited today's guest. Joining me is Stephanie Dampier, who is a board certified hearing instrument specialist and founder of Hear for Healing, and someone who is passionate about bringing hearing healthcare directly to people through house calls. So Stephanie, thank you for helping give my papa back part of his life. And thank
It's
you
my
for being
absolute
here.
pleasure. And I appreciate you just opening up the table for us to chat in a more informal way, we'll call it.
Yes, because
Your
we've talked
papa.
offline. We said this before this started, how much we've talked offline, in person, over the phone, and we've had incredible conversation. And I think that a lot of it really needs to be told publicly and heard by all of the members of our community and beyond.
Yes, agreed. And I so appreciate you being the one to open up that opportunity. So thank you again. Your papa, gosh, just such a great guy. So pleasant. I was a little nervous before meeting him myself because I knew in the past the hesitation and just the challenges of attempting to hear and it just not working and the letdown of the entire family in addition to. So first of all, you all have great genes. Your dad looks like he could be your brother. Your papa looks like he should be your dad. So his age, like I had to keep looking back at his date because I just couldn't believe in front of me. But it just goes to show staying active and just helps in the healthy aging process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So his hearing loss, gosh, such a challenge. I honestly wasn't even sure because sometimes when people wait too long, especially when they have different issues and challenges over years and years and not doing much to resolve those challenges, it can make it much harder for the ability to understand speech and for the brain to perceive hearing how we hope it will. So the fact that he had such a great response with the devices, even just with the testing and the word recognition scoring with the comprehensive evaluation that we did, it was just very inspiring. And I was just grateful to know that he was going to have a great result. I do remember the first day meeting how he was very reliant upon your dad and you with any conversation. He had the kind eyes that he so wanted to engage, but he really had no idea. My voice tends to be one of the more difficult frequencies, especially later on in life as hearing loss progresses. High frequency is typically the most challenging to understand. And I think my voice he wasn't getting at all. So gosh, just like you said, the reliance on the family. And then there's a lack of confidence in that. Kind of heartbreaking to me because I on a daily basis know the challenges that others have with just communication and family and just the uncertainty of what the result was going to be. Again, just very grateful that we had what we had with him. So, but the spark that came back, that's my favorite part of what I do is when I deliver the hearing aids and the hearing aids go in and we get them calibrated to where they need to be in speaking and just watching the light bulbs turn back in on the eyes. It's very gratifying. It helps me get out of bed every day.
All you have to do is watch that video, right? I can't believe it was over a year ago already. It's taken us this long to have this conversation. But when you reshared that video on the Here for Healing page, it's just really emotional to watch that again and hear the words coming out of his mouth and to recall some of them and what I was worried he might say.
Say for a while, but there wasn't no loud environment.
What branch?
Air Force.
Thank you for your service. Air Force. What does Air Force ride in? Airplane.
Mess. Colors. Mutt. Chow. Late.
There's the hearing aids. This is the hearing aid.
Yep.
These are the buttons, so that's volume control.
Yep.
There's an indicator on the bottom. The red means it's the right ear. The blue is the left ear.
Blue left, red right. It was possible once he gets to do it over and over
Yeah.
again, I'm sure it'll be easier for him.
Do you feel the difference?
Yeah. Listen,
Can
I
you
can
hear me
hear you
now?
now.
Okay, how's the volume? Is it okay?
The volume's okay.
All right, so tell us about the person behind Here for Healing. How did you end up doing this work?
So I found a great opportunity about 2.5 years ago to be a mobile practitioner. And through that process and the evolution of just learning the business and the legalities and everything entailed, I was able to expand my ability to help people all the way down to Medicaid, which very few providers, from my understanding, through the credentialing process. I haven't done the thorough research online to see specific numbers. However, there's less than 10 of us in all of Polk County alone, which for those who don't know, Polk County is larger than the state of Rhode Island. So that's quite significant. But I did work in a retail store atmosphere, and having the opportunity of watching memory care patients and assisted living patients, and even patients who are in independent living. They might be in the stage that the family has decided it's best for them not to drive anymore. A lot of those people are relying on their transportation from facilities, and we don't live in a perfect world, and people get sick and call off, and there would be days that there'd be short staffed, and I'd have one in particular, I'll never forget. It was a woman, 3 years old, sat in my lobby for 6 hours waiting on transportation. And I called the facility multiple times. They were simply just short staffed that day, and there was nothing they could do. So knowing that I can break down some of the barriers of transportation to be able to bring caring care to the home is great for everyone, especially the crazier the streets get that we all get to experience on a daily basis. Most of our patients who struggle to hear shouldn't be driving in those conditions alone, let alone regularly. So
That is something I didn't even know. So now what keeps you doing it?
the light bulbs that go on every day. And my husband has a great way of reminding me, because, we're, again, not every day is perfect. A lot of what I do is technology dependent. So just one metal roof can throw off an entire day of appointments.
Gosh.
But when I tend to overthink or start to stress, Josh has a great way of just tell him to watch The Price is Right a little bit longer. Oh, that's right, because they're not driving across town and they're not sitting in a lobby, and
Yeah.
there's no rush to get there. There's no rush to get back or stress to get back. That was another thing. A lot of times, based on availability, patients wouldn't come to me past 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would stay some days till 7 o'clock at night, but they wouldn't want to leave their house to be in the traffic past 2. So sometimes it could eliminate their ability to be seen for a week because I might not have a morning availability or an afternoon. So this way, it doesn't really, unless we're working around their schedule, which typically, again, we have all factors to take into consideration. I get to work around their doctor's schedules as well, and have a good, it's a pretty good idea of the overall system. And it's just well worth it knowing one less stressor to take off, because especially as we age, our confidence on the road is not what it used to be, or our ability to respond to quick situations that you don't see coming. And it's just safer, I feel, for me than for them.
Yeah. All right. So you have probably seen this hundreds of times. Why do families wait so long?
The individual. So I have found over time that properly treating hearing loss is very individualized, and the person who is pursuing that choice has to be mentally ready for the most part. A lot of times, depending on the positioning in the family, how strong of a personality the individual may have, a lot of times patients are just scared to approach the topic. People are very stubborn. I'd say overall, it's the stigma of hearing aids equal I'm old. And that is the barrier between. Plus the expense. For a very long time, insurance did not cover hearing aids. I've heard patients pay all the way up to $22,000 for a set of hearing aids. Mind blowing. Not sure what kind of gold is being encased on them, but it's the reality. And then more so, I'd say in the past 5 years or so, there's been more of somewhat of a benefit, depending on the coverage. Some people get full coverage, some people don't. And that's another part that a lot of people don't understand, is that there is more likely than not some sort of hearing aid benefit offered. And I am always willing to help navigate that as well. But the expense, and also it's just the mindset of the individual. And that's where I always say there's never any pressure. It's just a very personal approach. If you're ready, you're ready. If you're not, you're not. And no one's going to make that happen. The only person that's going to be able to embrace that is the individual again.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can relate that to the work that I do, because some people who are living with chronic disorganization, or for one reason or another are, they feel threatened by inviting someone to their home, even a family member or a friend or a neighbor. They don't let anybody in because of the conditions inside. And they also feel that a professional organizing company may judge them. It's kind of like the idea that you want to hire some help for cleaning your home, the traditional way, mopping, vacuuming, cleaning the actual surface areas, not clearing them per se. And so people tell me in Organized Haven when they call that I've held on to Nicole's card for 5 years. I met her at a presentation somewhere, and I just haven't been ready until now because I've feared judgment or what have you. So when I asked you that question, why do families wait so long? I mean, obviously, it's not about the family. It's about the person who needs the help. And in this case, to hear better. Okay. I think a lot of people assume hearing loss is simply about turning the TV louder. Like they feel like there is something that they can do, to hear better. I mean, even my 14-year-old tells me I need hearing aids, but he just needs to talk louder, So yeah, people without the actual problem, they don't understand it. And that's their first thought. Well, maybe their first thought isn't to turn the TV louder, because as a kid growing up, my Nana always lived with me. This is my Nana on my mom's side. I never had a babysitter. She was always the one to care for us when mom was working or putting herself through school. And I can remember walking home from middle school, and my friends could hear Nana's TV from down the street. They always commented, I think she needs to turn the TV down. But anyhow, it is really so much more than that. So one of my questions, what are some of the first things that you think the family notices about the person with hearing loss? And how do you think that this hearing loss really begins affecting relationships?
So definitely the TV. That's always, I would say 95% of the time, that is the first remark to come out of the individual's mouth, is everyone complains how loud the TV is. Also asking what? Constantly having to ask the family to repeat themselves, or challenges in restaurants with background noise. And I did want to piggyback on what you said, is volume doesn't equal clarity. And that is another huge misconception of the general public, is that by yelling what they want to say, or by even turning the TV up all the way to the top, that's going to make it audible. And that is not the case. Volume does not equal clarity. So just because it's louder doesn't make it clear. Definitely the use of what, and the constant repetition I find most people just lose their patience, don't want to repeat themselves anymore. They do repeat themselves, they're still misunderstood. And then what happens is there becomes, once again, a barrier in communication where less questions are being asked because of the lack of desire for the repetition. And then communication just tends to, and it's more common than not. A lot of times I'll hear married couples, they're sick of repeating themselves or they never understand what's being said and it turns into a joke and then it's just like an ongoing joke that's never being corrected and it ends up being quite sad. And what also a lot of people don't understand is over time what the brain doesn't hear, it will forget and you cannot retrain the brain with speech or sound. Yeah, it's just really important.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's devastating impacts otherwise.
For sure.
People ask me sometimes, or I think they just mention just casually when I talk about Papa and his hearing trouble, and Nana had it as well. She died at 78, though, in
Sorry.
2008. Thank you. And so she didn't really have the opportunity and maybe didn't have as good as genes as my Papa and on my dad's side. But anyhow, people say, well, I imagine he reads a lot of lips. But no, Stephanie, he doesn't. You can have a conversation with him and look at his eyes and they never leave your eyes. And so that is something that I thought, I don't know, is that different? Do people with hearing trouble normally read lips? Because my Papa never did.
I have patients that swear they don't read lips, and I believe that's the way that they communicate. So our brain is remarkable. When we have 5 senses and one diminishes, the other 4 naturally take over and get stronger. So visual cues, eye contact, lip reading, it all becomes part of the slow transition of communication.
I think for Papa, it might be he doesn't say what. He doesn't ask for you to repeat yourself. And if he's not looking down at your lips, I wonder if it's because he really doesn't want you to know that he can't hear you. Maybe that's why he's not reading lips. I gotta ask him sometime soon.
You should. He's the only one who knows.
Yeah,
Or he's really good at reading lips by looking in your eyes.
maybe.
It's like a peripheral vision because your mouth isn't that far from your eyes, right? It's like one
True.
little oval for most of us.
Maybe.
Practice next time you're with someone that you feel like you have to read their lips. Just look in their eyes and see if you can still read their lips.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be a good
Or
practice.
you can call me for a hearing test and I'll come
That's
to
a good
you.
point. Yes.
It's usually the family who recognizes the hearing loss first.
Well, then little Danny will be in the room.
Well, he was there. He got the whole education
Did.
at the library the first day.
He sure did.
He did. Now he's just
Mhm.
sharing the knowledge.
Yeah. Thank God, Mom, you finally got Stephanie for your own hearing benefit. If you could only hear this now.
Well, he'll have it on a video to be able to rewatch.
There you go.
And then he can rewind it and play it over and over.
To hear. Would you say that hearing loss is more about communication than hearing at all?
Yes. So hearing aids are essentially a tool. The conversation, the communication is the goal. People don't come in or contact me for a hearing evaluation because they aren't hearing the microwave beep or certain ambient sounds around their home. It's typically people sound like they're mumbling. That's another big one that I forgot to mention. If
Mumbling.
when people, it's regularly, oh, everyone says that I mumble, or everyone in my family mumbles. They all mumble. They all talk too fast. They mumble. It's time for a hearing evaluation. But it's definitely communication.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Church, people stop going to church because they can't hear. You know, they will hear the preacher, but conversation after the fact, forget it. And that will turn into social isolation over time.
Yeah.
For others because they're embarrassed or they realize, gosh, multiple times I've heard someone's in a crowded environment having a conversation. The individual smiles and just agrees with what they're saying and they walk away and the loved one's like, what did you just hear that they said? Because it was not a matter of smiling or laughing. It was typically some sort of trauma that just happened and the individual had no idea. So then the embarrassment comes in, they won't go back out, or they tend to just stay home, or you can see those. Well, I can see, because it's what I do every day, social circumstances where there's one person just there, physically there, but not engaged. It's another. So definitely communication.
Mm-hmm. You touched on this earlier, and I've actually noticed over the last several years that there's been a growing conversation about hearing and brain health. Can you help us understand what professionals such as yourself are learning?
We are learning there is a direct correlation to properly treating hearing loss for longevity of brain. Over time, again, what the brain doesn't hear, it will forget. Once the brain forgets sound or speech, you can't get it back. People who have difficulty hearing tend to isolate. Isolation will affect cognition over time. Not hearing proper auditory stimulation that is necessary to keep the brain healthy and active can contribute to cognitive decline. There have been multiple studies done. So based on research that has been provided over the past couple of years, there was an ACHIEVE trial in 2023 where hearing intervention slowed cognitive decline among older adults at increased risk. 2024, the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention, Intervention, and Care identifies hearing loss as one of the largest potentially modifiable risk factors for dementia. And National Institute on Aging supports evaluation and treatment of hearing loss as part of healthy aging. I've talked to multiple healthcare practitioners who have now, if people are coming in with concern of cognitive decline, they suggest a hearing evaluation and pursuing hearing aids for 6 months, then a psychiatric evaluation and recognition of whether or not the cognition is the issue. Anyone who is in the process of feeling they need to have their cognition evaluated, I would always recommend adding a hearing evaluation. I would suggest using that as part of the routine checks of overall health, just as important as blood pressure checks, annual blood work, vision evaluations, the things that are regularly checked and evaluated to make sure that they're on par. Hearing isn't one that's always recommended until there is an obvious concern that now the family may be mentioning to the doctor, or the doctor may be in the room realizing they're repeating themselves 8 times and the patient still isn't understanding what they're saying. And then that's typically when they'll be sent to me, is when it's at the severe point. I always say I wish that hearing aids were as natural for the ears as glasses are for the eyes, because there's such a stigma behind people just think that they're old if they have to wear hearing aids. And there are just so many benefits to life overall that are countless for those who pursue. It just takes time, and it's typically the family that is now pushing for there to be a resolve. And if the family's pushing, it's usually been on average 7 to 10 years. People wait too long.
Or
7 or 50. I feel like with him though, he tried. If I remember correctly, he tried a few times and there just was no resolve, or there was a lack of patience. I don't know if it was on the healthcare provider, on your papa, or maybe both at that point in time. And then I think also as the aging process happens, those get more comfortable in their home and they're not as apt to go to the 7th doctor appointment for the week. Not that I'm a doctor. However, you might as well put it on the list, because I guess that's the most recurring thing I hear out of most people's mouths. Once you hit 65, you go to the doctor for like 3 things every week. And nobody wants to add hearing on top of it. It's like one less thing they have to do, the better, where they don't really have an excuse if I come to them.
Well, but obviously it's so important, early intervention, especially because hearing loss can sometimes be mistaken for memory problems. So imagine if it never was a problem to begin with.
It'd be amazing.
And so just for reference here, these are conversations, these are not debates, but it is important discussion. And I think something that families not only need, but they want to hear, that there are options and that it's not going to cost them $22,000 necessarily. And that, these are things that can be fixed before they're even a problem. So I have to tell everybody, when we first planned this episode, you were coming on simply as the expert. And then something happened. You became the patient. So I loved hearing this story after you got back from your conference. And my questions are, what made you decide to get hearing aids yourself? And what surprised you in the process?
It's the sitting at kitchen tables on a daily basis, listening to people's complaints about communication, and in my head, checking off all of the same boxes. Or the few times that I've been in a household and a patient will say something and I would respond, and their response would be, "Do you need hearing aids?" I'm like, actually, family gatherings where my niece and nephews are speaking and I can't understand half of what they're saying because they sound like they're mumbling, or going to a Better Living for Seniors meeting and more than 5 people talking and being completely lost in conversation. And I think I laugh because it's just so common to hear, and it's hard for me to accept because I am not at the age of Social Security. We'll just say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I will say the Lakeland band director, the marching band director, Luke Hart, and I'm saying this because I'm allowed to say this, I got his permission. He was fit with hearing aids after he turned 40. So, and he had a lot of chronic ear infections and such growing up, just had all kinds of challenges that it has affected his hearing. But then again, marching band director, I think, says it all. And just watching through his experience, and that was last summer. So it's been almost a year since he was fit to when I was fit, as was Josh. And that we personally experienced the communication barriers. And this is another thing I have found also within the community, is that when one person in the household has a more pronounced hearing loss, the partner doesn't even recognize their own because they're so focused on the fact that the other person can't hear. It's almost like a subconscious comparison that they don't even realize is happening. And unfortunately, a lot of times I have had a lot of spouses come in for hearing aids after their spouse has passed away. And then they start telling me that they've been struggling for 10, 15 years. And I say, why have you waited so long? And it's typically because so-and-so's loss was so much worse. I was the one that was the ear. So it becomes very convoluted in that type of circumstance, which is more common than not. So the daily repetition of conversation, I just stopped talking to Josh at certain points where I knew if he wasn't getting it, or it would just depend on the day where the conversation would be cut off because of my lack of interest of repeating myself. Same thing with just across the room. And that's another thing a lot of people go back on. And for me personally, so I think about growing up in Pennsylvania, we had a 2-story home. I could be on the other side of the house and hear what was being said downstairs, where now if I have a family member talking in another room, I have no idea what they're saying. So that's another, it's like, I used to be able to hear that. I don't hear that anymore. So that's another example. What I have learned,
No, please.
what has surprised me and what I have learned is I'm my own worst patient. It has been an absolute adjustment to hearing aids. If anything, it has taught me more realistic approach to helping people adjust, because it's never going to sound like it used to. However, the ability to understand speech clearly in circumstances that are most important is beyond priceless. Personally, I'm not as overwhelmed in crowded environments. I'm very much so an introvert, and you get me in a group of people, I'm usually the one like in the corner, not really wanting to be in the middle of it all. I'm not necessarily saying I want to be in the middle of it all, but I just don't feel as overstimulated in environments. And I feel that has a lot to do with auditory processing, which I learned while I was in Minnesota at Starkey also, is that the brain is remarkable and how it processes information, and what the technology now is able to do through artificial intelligence. And we're not eliminating background noise. It's not going away. It's just making it more comfortable. So you're focusing on what you want to with the other humans versus shutting it all off. Because the shutting it off is what we don't want to do. We want to have full spatial awareness of what's going on around us at all times, because it's imperative for our safety as well. It is a challenge to get used to, though. And have learned over the years, most people don't like their hearing aids because they don't wear them all of the time. And
Mm.
here is the fact. If you don't wear them all of the time, they are never going to sound correct. And I have experienced that for myself. Josh has been very systematic and routine about his hearing aids. First thing in the morning, they go in and he goes about the day. I don't know, I think it's an age thing. I'm having a hard time embracing it, but I get it. If anything, it makes me more empathetic to all the other humans who are going through it. And I don't know. It gives me more of the real life experience that the others are going through as well. So it helps us to be able to relate much easier.
Yeah, I mean,
Hopefully, that's the goal.
when you know why the hearing aid is ringing because you've had to adjust it for your own self, you can speak to that a lot easier, I can imagine. All right, so now for some practical advice, I'm going to give you a rapid fire list of questions. If someone is listening today and they're experiencing some of these things, what specific signs should they watch for?
Others complaining that you can't hear, feeling like others are mumbling when they speak, the TV getting louder, difficulty in crowded environments.
What questions should they specifically ask at their doctor's appointment, maybe?
Do I need a referral to have a hearing evaluation?
Love it. And how can families encourage a loved one who is resistant?
You're not tied to the outcome. So it's important to have hearing evaluated. No one knows what the hearing situation looks like. Even a simple hearing evaluation can help determine if there's a blockage, if there's even maybe fluid buildup, if there's a need to go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. The hearing evaluation can tell that through the bone conduction portion. I've had patients find they were on the verge of a stroke through bone conduction and air bone gap. I've had a patient who had a double wrapped artery at the base of her skull who was emergency flown back to Michigan for her doctor to take care of. So there's a lot that can be found from a hearing evaluation. So there's no harm or foul. It doesn't hurt to have one done. There's no needles involved.
Yeah.
It's not scary, and it's really a personal decision. So if I say, always just say, give it a try. I know for the state of Florida, they require a minimum 30-day trial. So anyone who pursues hearing aids, 30 days from the day that they're delivered, they can return them and get their money back. Sometimes people charge a restocking fee, depends on the situation that they're in. However, it's not once you buy them, you're stuck with them. You can't change. And a lot of times there's still some sort of exchange opportunity or other aside from return. It's just at least finding what you are missing. And that's another part of hearing is because our brain is so remarkable. When the five senses, one diminishes, the other four get stronger. The individual doesn't realize themselves what they're missing. It's typically the family members who realize it first. So once the hearing aids are obtained and the trial period has gone through, a lot of people are able to experience what they've been missing. Otherwise, they'll never know. So just encouraging that you're not stuck with it and there's no pressure, and just keeping in mind, I always ask that the families allow me to be the professional and ask the questions, and I will engage the family members when I want the engagement to take place. Otherwise, I would love the conversation to stay between the patient and I, because we can uncover more of the personal experience with really if they do recognize the hearing loss or if it's the pressure of everyone else around. And
That
less
makes
is
sense.
more. Less is more.
For sure. Okay. I love ending every episode on hope. What excites you most about hearing healthcare today?
Just the advancement of technology and what it's capable of doing to help people just re-engage in their lives, to communicate with their family, with their loved ones, to go back to church. So many people are going back to church because they can hear again. There's just so many amazing opportunities for reconnecting people with the environments that they love the most. That's most exciting for me. And it just helps with healthy aging, because the more we stay connected and we communicate, co-regulation is so important for us to thrive and to be able to live and continue. That, it was once said best to me that talking is how we communicate with others, hearing is how others communicate with us. So the ability to just bring others back to their loved ones and back into communication, it's exciting. What gives me hope
Mm-hmm.
is watching my patients reconnect with their families, their loved ones, family gatherings, church and community events again. Hearing isn't just about sound, it's about living fully.
Agreed. If every listener remembered just one thing from today's conversation, what would you want it to be?
Comprehensive hearing evaluations don't hurt. You have nothing to lose. There are no needles involved, no blood will be drawn. It's a simple picture of what is going on with your hearing health.
Stephanie, thank you so much, not just for today, but what you've done for my family. This conversation isn't just theoretical for me. I've watched my papa smile more, laugh more. We just went to Renneger's Flea Market for Father's Day, and he was so present for the conversation and able to participate more simply because someone cared enough to help him hear again. And I know there are families listening today who may have someone just like my papa. So my hope is that today's conversation encourages them not to wait, because better hearing isn't just about hearing. As you say, it's about reconnecting with the people that we love.
Thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And the greatest compliment that I could possibly receive is being able to help someone's family. So, and especially your papa, I just know how such high regard and love that you all have for him. And I can see why. It was just an absolute pleasure. And I met just the entire family in the process, with the exception of your husband. He's the only one and
Well,
I did get to go to a Popka. I did go to a Popka, and I had the pleasure also of meeting your Nana.
that's
So
right. Yes. And I am so disappointed I wasn't able to come for that, but I'm so thankful that you did take the time and that you take the time every day to help people hear again and to have these conversations, and guaranteed we're going to continue having them. And so thank you for coming on the transition table and helping me broadcast this all important message.
thank you for having me. And I just want to know when it's my turn to ask you questions. We need to flip the table around.
Yes, that's right. I won't forget.
All right. So just let all your listeners know you're going to be answering some questions yourself here pretty soon.
You got it. I'm an open book.
All right. All right. We love it. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Don't leave me, all right? I'm going to stop the
All right.
recording, but we're going to
Never.
hang tight. Bye, y'all.